Awesome. Welcome to everybody joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us for this month's webinar, where we are looking at cybersecurity and data protection for entrepreneurs. Now, this is a topic that we definitely had a few inquiries about. So if you have any other topics that you'd love to see as webinars, please reach out to us on our social media or our WhatsApp channel, or even our info at SME South Africa email address if you would like to. So today we are joined by Gary Manzini, the Business Development Manager at um, Mimecast, and he has over 10 years of experience working in South Africa's ICT and cybersecurity ecosystem, and a lot of experience helping hundreds of organizations, specifically micro businesses to large corporates, when it comes to protecting their data and understanding how to protect yourself and your employees from the dangers that lurk on the internet. Welcome, Gary. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you so much, Marina. And good morning to everyone. As she's introduced, my name is Gary, surname by Manzini. And it's a real privilege to be with you all today. I've been with, for the past 10 years, I've worked with businesses across South Africa, from township entrepreneurs, micro and small businesses, NGOs, clinics, all the way to national retailers and public sector entities. And across these environments, I've helped hundreds of organizations protect their email, secure their documents, train their teams, prevent fraud, and recover from online scams, but not just only limited to that. But throughout this journey, one thing has become very clear, and it's that cyber attacks don't only happen because systems are weak. They happen because people are busy, they're stressed, or sometimes they're just unaware of what to look out for in such cases. And there's global research that will back this up. What we now know is that human behavior is the number one driver to cyber incidents. Today's session is not about complicated technology or expensive tools. It's about simple, practical steps that anyone can apply, no matter the size of the organization or the industry that they operate in. The goal today is to help you protect your business, your staff, and your customers, and ultimately protect your money or your revenue, and however you'd like to define it as. But before we look into the insights, part of the data that I'll be using today will come from the Mimecast 2025 State of Human Risk Report. And this was developed through an independent global research entity called Vanson Bourne, an international research firm. And what they did is they interviewed over 1,100 IT and security leaders across the United States, Europe, South Africa, and Australia. So all these organizations that were involved in this research had 250 or more employees. And the reason for that was that organizations of those sizes generally will have a formal IT policy that's in place. They'll have documented cyber incidents that they've experienced in the past. They'll have dedicated security staff, measurable reporting capabilities, and to a degree, process or SOPs or clear processes that are getting refined over time. So what this allowed the researchers to do is to track the patterns, compare the data, and identify the trends accurately across the countries, across all these entities. But the key point here that is, even though the study particularly was focused on 250 plus employee organizations, the types of attacks that they face are the same attacks that affect smaller businesses, medium businesses, schools, clinics, nonprofits, and even micro organizations. Human behavior doesn't change with the company size. We all face the same risk. So the insights from this research today is helpful for anyone in this room, in this forum, whether you lead a team of 5 individuals, 50, or 5,000 individuals across the organization. So cybercrime is rising across the world, and I'm pretty sure all of us are aware of that. And South Africa continues to rank among the most targeted countries for phishing, impersonation, fraud, banking detail changes, social engineering, and ransomware. So globally, what we're seeing from a trend perspective is human error, firstly, is and again, very pivotal now, is playing the biggest role in most breaches or compromises. Second to that, 95% of organizations from the study expect email attacks to increase. Well, it has increased because we're now at the end of 2025. And attacks through tools like WhatsApp, Teams, Slack, if you're using that, Zoom, like we're leveraging right now, have actually grown to 44%. So they're utilizing these extended platforms. About 80%, or 8% rather, not 80, 8% of users in a typical organization will drive most of the risk or have risky behavioral patterns. And this is often due to work pressure or life pressure or even the workload that they'll probably presented with or that they're dealing with. Many incidents will begin with a level of social engineering. Attackers basically convincing someone to take an action that will benefit them. And in South Africa, these global patterns are more visible. There's reports from other vendors or other sources, such as ESET. And what they do is they're an antivirus security provider. They've been around for 30 years. There's Interpol that's also submitted or actually call it contributed to this research as well. And then there's ITWeb that shows that South Africa is experiencing a very high volume of ransomware and phishing attempts. Phishing alone represents more than half of all the reported cyber threats locally. And this shows up in real scenarios such as, altered or fake supply invoices, WhatsApp account takeovers, email impersonation, payment redirection scams, business social media page compromises, unauthorized access to mailboxes, business mailboxes in this case, or even personal ones, and then customer information that's been exposed or stolen. These issues affect any organization of any size, from small NGOs to schools, SMEs, online stores, or corporates. Attackers, what they are generally looking for is the opportunity. They don't really care about the size. So they focus on the platforms and the communication channels or the tools that we use on a daily basis. Before we move into the solutions, it's important that we all get a clear understanding of how these attacks actually happen. So let's look at the few techniques that we generally see from a security or cyber perspective in the wild or in reality. The first one, which will be very common, is phishing. And this actually can come across in various forms. And just a disclaimer, this is an AI-generated tool. And I'm going to use that aspect to a certain degree later on in this conversation. But phishing happens when attackers will send an email or an SMS, a WhatsApp message, or a social media alert that looks completely normal, sometimes even professional. And the intention here is to get someone to click on a link, open a file, or share personal information. The messages that work and that are associated to these would be something that looks like it's routine or it's urgent. And the statements generally would range from your parcel is waiting for delivery. The next one would be your account will be suspended, verify now. Invoice attached, payment overdue, or the classic one, your boss has shared a document with you. This is for the new starts who are still trying to level up with the unwritten ground rules from a new organization perspective. So what attackers are doing is they design these messages to imitate or copy banks, suppliers, government services, Microsoft 365 or Google, we'll speak to that later on. SaaS, courier companies, we see that a lot on SMSs, social media alert, or even internal colleagues that we work with. So, I mean, once someone interacts with the message, and attackers may just, have these specific outcomes, such as steal the login passwords to your mail account or your account in general, install software viruses, redirect payments, collect personal or customer details for their own gain access to a business email account, or impersonate the victim that they've actually gained access to from an account perspective, or ultimately just pivot deeper into the organization through the connected platforms that we use from a cloud perspective or from a solution perspective that you're being provided. So phishing succeeds because attackers study their behavior. They know that people are busy, we're moving very fast to that fact. And then we're dealing with large volumes of communication. So they rely on timing, trust, and distraction, not technical weaknesses in this situation. Other common signs of phishing would include email impersonation that we've highlighted earlier on. And this is where attackers don't access the systems at all. What they do is they'll just create an email address that looks almost identical to the real one and use it to send instructions or requests. They'll add one extra character or an altered character that can make the difference very hard to spot, as you can see in the illustration here. Um, another attempt or another technique they use is fake invoices. Once they obviously leveraging the email impersonation attempt or technique, as in this case, attackers will have access to an email account or study the conversation. And this is if they've got access to the account and have actually compromised it. And then what they'll do is within this compromised state, which in our studies, we've actually seen a compromised account can only be detected that it actually has been taken over up to 8 months or a year. You can imagine how many transactions, how many people you've been communicating with in a space of 8 months alone. There's so many transactions, there's so many communications, there's so many confirmations. And what they do is they'll wait for the real invoice. If there is some form of transaction that requires an invoice, is they'll wait for a real invoice to be sent, then send a modified version of that with new banking details. And I'm pretty sure most of us have actually been exposed to this in this negative form. And because the invoice looks expected, the change easily goes unnoticed unless there's a standard operating procedure that's been put in place to say, if there are banking details that are changed, we need to either call and verify. And this is a two-way streak or a two-way handshake where the party on the other end would also have to have these standard operating procedures to ensure that they don't fall victim for fraudulent payment requests that look like the one that we're talking about today. Other common signs further to that is credential theft or password theft. Attackers generally what they'll do is they will create fake login pages that will mimic platforms like Microsoft, Google, or other banking portals. And the reality for this is that from a Microsoft perspective, a lot of organizations are utilizing this platform extensively. There's a growing trend. Just let alone from statistics that have been out from 2024, the United States had over 1 million organizations utilizing Microsoft. This is just in one country. Now, there's been an extensive usage of Microsoft, and organizations are utilizing this because it's easier to communicate. People share documents. And again, if you're using a different platform, it's very difficult to actually get that, and it makes business very tough, and you become not so easy to deal with in this situation. And so parallel to the growth, there's parallel attempts to actually attack or mimic those platforms to fool people. So when someone gets a fictitious Microsoft 365 login page that gets delivered by email, in most cases, someone will enter their credentials. And so what will happen in the case is this fake website will then capture those details and then send them to the attacker that wants to gain unauthorized access to the mailbox. But it only doesn't end at the mailbox, because with a solution like a Microsoft or a Google Workspace or any cloud platform that you use, it's such a diverse platform that consolidates all of the services. So there's mailboxes that they've got access to from a malicious perspective. It's the files that have been shared on the emails that have been stored on your cloud storage platforms like OneDrive, what's the other one? G Drive, Dropbox. This financial information, if you're utilizing a capability or a free, call it mechanism to log into systems called single sign-on, and you're using the same username and the password, they will utilize that information to access other platforms, financial systems, and customer data. And so this is where it's imperative to have something called multi-factor authentication, which drastically reduces the risk significantly by eliminating or reducing them having exposure to that. But we will talk to multi-factor authentication as a solution to actually incorporate in the organization. And then what we also start to see is from an organization perspective is social media page hacks. Business pages that are appealing targets because the audience is there and then there's credibility. So what attackers will often do here is they'll try to gain access through weak or reused passwords, or through a phishing link that's actually sent through the page admins. But once they're inside a social media account, and this is, it could be LinkedIn, it could be Instagram, could be TikTok. A lot of businesses are leveraging these social media platforms to advertise their services. And I've got one account, actually, just one account that I've actually come across where this was a hairstylist. This is a micro business. This is one individual, and they sell luxurious hair. I mean, up to the value of about 20,000 Rand per unit. Now, this individual unfortunately had their account compromised. Someone logged into their Instagram account. And you can imagine, because this person, I mean, if he's selling hair to the range of 20,000 Rand, he's got repeat customers. And so he's got credibility. He's got his customer confidence. So this person who's gained access to this social media account that belongs to this individual is now interacting and transacting with customers. And because he's built up such a long history of trust with his customers are readily, easily available to pay funds to him because they trust that he will deliver the supposed or the proposed product, which is the luxurious hair. So in this situation, what was happening is obviously the malicious access to his account were transacting or getting payments to a fictitious account, and because customers utilizing um, call it call it non-corporate platforms like social media and using direct messages on those platforms, people are just transacting and then obviously paying via e-wallet, nothing that necessarily goes to an account in this situation. So it's actually very difficult to even trace it in that case. And what's happening now is, as the business owner, you're losing credibility, you're losing money. Only he realized it later on that, hey, listen, my customers are actually transacting with a fictitious entity that's actually compromised my account. So not only does it tarnish his brand, it also kills his confidence from a customer perspective. Customers have a 67% chance or even higher to leave and not deal with an organization that's actually gone through some form of compromise, and they have ultimately lost something. It even happens even if they've not lost any forms of funds in any way or form. So social media page hacks are quite a thing, and they cripple quite a lot of micro businesses that actually utilize social media for business transactions. Another one would be WhatsApp account takeovers, where criminals will attempt to obtain that 6-digit verification code. And once they've got that, they can register your number on their device and start to send messages to your contacts, often posing as you. And generally, they'll ask for, hey, I'm in a rut. Can you please send me some form of funds or cash? They'll send it to family members. If it's a business account and you're utilizing WhatsApp, then there's even a bigger problem where now they'll start leveraging and targeting your customers because you've got that credibility and that trust that's actually been built over a respective amount of time. With all of this, once someone gains access to your account, one thing I'd really not wish on anyone is, yes, unauthorized access is a problem. Losing money to unauthorized access and someone posing as you is a problem. Another one would be ransomware, where this is software or viruses that locks your files completely. And because someone has access to your accounts, they can either exfiltrate or remove or take out this data. That will be documents or any kind of information. Or ultimately, what they can do now to extort you even further is they will install this malware that locks your files and systems, and then they'll ultimately demand forms of payment so that they can even restore the access. And usually this starts with some form of malicious attachment or harmful links that you're not even aware of that may have been received via WhatsApp, email, or even your personal email accounts on your specific laptop that you use to trade with as well. And another element would be, again, weak remote access passwords. And this is one of those few criteria as well that we actually start to see from a compromise perspective. Now, these are the problems, or these are the techniques that are being leveraged. But let's talk about how to protect your organizations using practical, simple steps to prevent what we just discussed. What we'll do is we'll discuss 4 parts: how to protect your business data, simplified document, how to protect your business data, and simply all the documents that you actually transact with, that you share, all the way down to the customers that you interact with, and then the business team that you work with that handles the data and communicates with the customers as well. And then look at effective measures that we can all action from today. Every organization handles sensitive documents daily. That'll be invoices, contracts, IDs, copies, payroll, customer data, supply records. But the research shows that IT leaders worry most about accidental information leak, oversharing of information, whether it be verbally in public spaces or whether it be on devices such as cell phones and they're not really being monitored, weak passwords coming up again, the use of public Wi-Fi or unsafe networks that we are not aware of and where they're actually coming from in coffee shops or any public spot, sending files to personal emails, mishandling files in these collaboration tools that we use, like Teams or any other form of collaboration tool that you utilize as an instant messaging tool. So how can you, as an individual, manage or reduce the risk? So let's look at 5 simple ways to protect your documents. So the first one would be, and again, not in an order of importance, but the first one that comes top of mind would be cloud storage, which is one of the simplest ways to protect sensitive business information. So when documents are kept only in laptops or hard drives, WhatsApp or USBs, they are at risk of being lost, stolen, or corrupted. Platforms like OneDrive and SharePoint and Google Drive provide secure storage, easy sharing, version control, and then provide proper access management. So what this will ultimately do is they will help you protect company data and work more efficiently and recover information quickly if something goes wrong. And going wrong in most cases is you're working on one document in the office, you did not click Control Save or Control S, or you just did not save it simply, and then you want to try and get home and try and work on the same document that you were working on for the past 3 hours, only to find that it did not save successfully, or most of your progress is actually not being stored. So platforms like OneDrive and Google Drive will actually help save your, call it your progress at the point of entry. And this is usually like at, call it 2 5-minute intervals where it actually looks at the changes and then updates those changes. So it actually is quite advantageous to utilize this from a productivity perspective over and above from a security standpoint. Whenever possible, it's always great to use secure links instead of attachments. So attachments in this situation, and this is in a particular situation where you are sending these files on email to someone outside or within the organization as well. So attachments can be saved, and that this is the downside of it, is that attachments physically can be saved, copied or forwarded or downloaded without your knowledge. However, what a secure link will do is to give you full control. You can even decide who can access it, how long, and what they're allowed to do with it. So you can dictate how they can handle it. This keeps your documents protected and ensures that people will always open the latest version. And then also lets you remove access at any time if you feel something has actually changed. But why would this matter? And how would this help you? So a few cases. Incorrect banking detail updates. So instead of sending a banking change as a PDF attachment, maybe share a view-only link that cannot be altered or forwarded without permission. We spoke about compromises. So this limits that exposure from that perspective. Contracts or HR documents using secure links. This will reduce the chance of confidential documents being stored on personal devices and even being shared beyond the company domain or outside the company. Customer files or invoices. Because links can expire automatically, this makes it safer for customers to download documents without having to keep permanent copies in a particular situation. And then again, these are just scenarios that will be applicable in your day-to-day business interactions. The other easy steps that you don't have to pay for, if you're leveraging platforms like, well, actually, if you're leveraging any platform, if you're using social media, you can enforce something called multi-factor authentication. So this is one of the simplest and most effective security steps that you can take, even if your password is stolen. Multi-factor, or if we shorten it, MFA, will add a second checkpoint or a code on your phone or an authentication app that attackers or anyone malicious externally can't access. And what this ultimately does is it blocks almost all automated attacks that would try to access your account, and then dramatically reduces the impact of phishing, regardless of the type of technique that we spoke about earlier on. If there's one control that you would need to enable today, let it be MFA. This is free, it's easy to set up to a degree, and it's available on almost any platform that anyone would rely on. So if you're logging into LinkedIn, or if you're logging into Facebook, I've got this, I'm testament of it. I would literally show you how many, call it second factor or two-factor codes I'm using for each platform that I'm accessing from a LinkedIn perspective, Facebook, or social media in general, or even mail accounts. But there's apps like Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator, Authy, Duo, and particularly, I think, let me give you a view of this. Yeah, Duo Mobile, which actually costs nothing. You can download these from the app stores or from the Play Store, depending on the mobile device that you're using. And it's important to turn this on for any platform, because stores because platforms that we utilize will store sensitive information, the email, the cloud, banking apps, payroll, CRM, accounting systems, social media pages, and even the website management tool that you utilize. This extra step will block at least up to 99% of all the automated attacks that your organization would possibly see, even if your password is reused, leaked, or stolen. Now, in addition to this, of course, this will give you secondary codes in addition to those reused or weak passwords. It is quite also recommended before you even get to the MFA perspective, is using strong, unique passwords. This is something that you can also enforce very easily right now. And it's quite a sore spot for a lot of folks. We all gravitate to password 12345, our name, or anything of that sort. But using a strong, unique password is one of the most effective ways that we can protect not only the organizations, but even ourselves from a personal perspective. Most breaches will happen because the password was leaked, or it was reused, or it was just way too easy to guess. A good password doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be long and unique. You can even change languages or use ethnic languages if you want to make that. But there's tools like password managers that can help take this pressure off by generating and then storing these strong passwords for you. And when you combine this aspect with multi-factor authentication, it drops even further to a dramatical state. The other recommendation is if you do have the ability and the time and the consistency, backups is also another simple form and a powerful way to protect your organization. There are two types that actually work well. So there's cloud backups, which we spoke about earlier on, and then there's offline backups. So cloud backups will protect you when your devices fail or your files are deleted on your actual device. And this is because the cloud backup will store the copies of your file in a secure remote location, which is separate from your main device. And particularly if you're using Microsoft or Google, they will have this function where you can enable so that anything that you work on will be stored on these third-party platforms like OneDrive or G Drive in this situation. And examples of these are particularly G Drive, OneDrive, iCloud Drive backups will be another one, Dropbox is another one. But you also do get professional backup tools, which you need to pay for, which will range from platforms known as Acronis, Blackblaze, Veeam, just to mention a few, which are actually quite good for SMEs to utilize. This is actually great for everyday protection, remote work, quick recovery that you can rely on. Another form of backup, in addition to the online that will actually actively work in the background without you having to intervene, would be a second form of backup, which we do recommend as well. So in case your cloud storage has been compromised, again, if you remember, if you've got a weak password, someone's gained access, they can gain access to your storage repositories. So in situations where there's one of these factors that were a lagging indicator, such as a weak password and someone's gained access to that, if you've backed up to an offline repository, similar to a hard drive of some sort, this will protect you from ransomware and give you a second layer of recovery. So even if you forget everything else, this one I would recommend. So one, backup is good, but two will really make it quite a resilient strategy for your business, or just alone if you're actually doing that. You can get these types of hard drives from any store, Incredible Connection, Hi-Fi Corporation, and anything that actually is like about 500 gigabytes, that would be sufficient enough that matches your laptop. But again, generally, if you walk into these stores, there will be specialists that will be able to advise you on what you would need to take, or that will work for your organization. One of the most effective ways, also free, to protect your organization is to limit who can see sensitive information. Not everyone needs access to payroll systems, contracts, where they're actually stored, customer data, or financial records. Giving access to only the people or the one person who needs it will help prevent mistakes, protect privacy, reduce fraud risk, and then stop attackers from reaching critical files, even if the account is compromised, because you've only isolated it to that one individual or that group of people that have access to that particular file set. Most cloud platforms are able to do this. They can actually give you an ability to remove access or block someone from specific access or files that they would need to have visual, call it, exposure to. All right. So these 5 actions, just as a recap, these can help reduce the risk that any SME or any large organization can face in an everyday to day basis when handling data across electronic devices. So that's store your files in the cloud. You can do a screenshot of this, turn on multi-factor authentication, sharing files, using secure links, making backups, and limiting access to a degree where possible. Now, what about the customers that trust you? Because we're doing this to, yes, to operate, but at the same light, I mean, the people that we work with trust us and they believe that we've got measures in place to prevent any form of compromise. But how do we protect the customers that trust us, and how do we do that? Just for context, a single cyber incident can break the trust quickly. We spoke about an account compromise for call it a beauty therapist who just had their account and people was paying the wrong account. 60% chances of them not coming back at all. So attacks and collaboration tools are rising sharply. I mean, and even in ordinary tools like WhatsApp, Teams, Zoom, and Slack also. So let's look at ways that we can actually protect our customers' data and they trust if we're not utilizing these other platforms like that. How do we ensure that that's in place? Before we recommend the best practices, let's look at the real data that shows why using WhatsApp for business is actually risky. So there's a 2025 survey by KnowBe4 Africa, which found that 93% of organizations across Africa are using WhatsApp for workplace communication. More than email or any other collaboration tool, for that fact. This is wide adoption that makes it a prime target for cyber criminals. In South Africa alone, WhatsApp counts nearly 29 million users, roughly about 94% of all online users. Many people use the same platform. Attackers only need to compromise one account to reach many organizations quickly. Even mobile networks and security firms have issued repeated warnings about rising account takeovers, SIM swap attacks. I've had a fair share of that from, I'm not going to mention the company name, and impersonation scams targeting WhatsApp users. So once criminals get access, they may see and distribute sensitive files, impersonate employees, or commit fraud using stolen credentials. Finally, as a cybersecurity analyst, I would like to really point this out. Using WhatsApp for business creates something which we call shadow IT. It removes control. You can't audit. You don't have high levels of compliance, so you really don't understand what's going on. And that is why when handling sensitive documents like IDs, payment, proof of payments, contracts, banking details, it is significantly safer to use controlled or enterprise-grade tools like email, where access and logging and security policies can be enforced. So the rule of thumb here is that convenience should not really come at the expense of control and security when it comes to utilizing platforms like WhatsApp in this case when handling customer information. And this is just to give you an idea of exactly what personal information, what sensitive information looks like. But overall, regardless of the data type or the classification, it should be handled safely, regardless of the classification and utilizing the respective tools that are easy to manage. Now, this is a technology that's actually been around for quite some time. They call it DMARC, but let's talk about it in simple terms. So this is actually becoming a requirement for anyone who sends emails, and we'll dive into that. So think of DMARC as an identity checking system for your email domain. So most of us here, if we're not using @gmail.com and we're using a particular organizational domain, this would actually fit very well for that. So just to illustrate what we're talking about, imagine that there's a post office check. And this checker, what he does is he looks at whether the sender is real before delivering the letter. So this DMARC checker, call him a bouncer or the validator, he will check if whether the email that claims to come from your business is actually legitimate, as you can see from the top section of the illustration. All emails at this point, if you don't have DMARC, will actually go through that inbox and get delivered particularly to your customers. So without DMARC, anyone in the world can send an email that looks like it came from your domain, from accounts that look like finance@yourcompany.coza, HR@yourcompany.coza, and you particularly may not even have CEO@yourcompany.coza, but because it has @yourcompany.coza, it's going to get delivered to your customers. And this is how most payment redirection fraud, invoice scams, and impersonation attacks begin. What DMARC does is ultimately stop this. So what it will do is verify the identity every time an email is sent from the organization. And if the email is real and actually coming from your platforms that you utilize, your 365, your Google Workspaces, it will go through. If it's fake, if someone is pretending to be your business, DMARC, the bouncer, will block it before it reaches your customer, your suppliers, or staff members. Now, why is this becoming such an important thing right now? In the last few years, email impersonation has become one of the biggest drivers for financial loss. Attackers will copy your domain, send out fake invoices, request banking details to be changed. So when customers receive these emails, they'll often trust, and because it appears that it's coming from you, they will go ahead and action it. And this is why global email providers like Google, Yahoo, and Microsoft have tightened the rules. So what they do now is they now expect all businesses that send emails, including small businesses, SMEs, schools, NGOs, or public entities, to have three mechanisms. And I don't like going into there's three mechanisms which are called SPF, DKIM, and DMARC in place. Without these three parts here, your emails are more likely to land in spam or get rejected. So if you're a marketing company and you want to send emails and you don't have these three aspects, SPF, DKIM, and DMARC, your emails or your message or what you want to solve for is ultimately not even getting to the person that it needs to get to. It's just dying in the air. So who needs to enforce DMARC? Any business that owns a domain, a professional domain that they use to send emails or are publicly known as that in the internet space. Any organization sending email to customers, suppliers, or the public. Anyone sending invoices or banking information. Anyone who wants their brand to be trusted and not impersonated, all the way down to government agencies. SMEs that are using Microsoft or Google Workspace, or any company that simply just wants reliable email delivery and reputational checks if you are struggling with that. DMARC really protect in the situation? Well, it protects your customers so that they don't receive fake invoices or banking changes that are illegitimate. Your suppliers, so that they don't get payment diversion scams. Your employees, so that they don't get internal identity or fraudulent attacks. Your brand. This protects your brand by stopping the criminals from using your domain and targeting your customers externally. And the bottom line here is just preventing fraud and financial loss. So anyone who receives an email from you would basically be protected by this DMARC mechanism. So this will ensure that anyone or everyone who receives an email with your name on it, they can be confident that it generally comes from you. And as impersonation attacks continue to rise, especially here in South Africa, this mechanism, DMARC, has become one of the most important and high impact controls that any organization can implement. Now, we're sending emails externally to people. We've got probably websites that we've got. We want to eliminate the chances of us getting payment diversion attempts to be successful. Another aspect, if you're sending out emails to people, is just to enforce some form of warning. And we see this a lot in most websites. A lot of public-facing websites will have this. But one of the simplest ways in which you can protect your customers from fraud is to communicate clear rules about how you handle payments. A single line like, "We will never change banking details through email," that can prevent a customer from losing thousands, even millions of rands from impersonation scams. So when customers know what you will and won't do, it becomes much harder for criminals to trick them by using fake emails, cloned domains, or forged invoices, because you've got a standard operating procedure that's been put in place, or you've simply got a way that you've actually articulated on most of the communication tools that you use, like email, for example. Now, when customers visit your website, if you've got one, or log into a portal, they trust that that connection to your website is actually safe. But that safety depends on the technology that sits behind the scenes. So let's break it down a little bit further. So when a website, anyone who goes to any website, you can go to smesouthafrica.coza. Just for an example, when a website uses something called HTTP, you'll see it on the top right or top left of your screen when you're on the browser or on the search field. That just means if it's HTTP, the connection between your device and the website is not encrypted. That means anyone on the same Wi-Fi or an attacker intercepting that traffic can see what you type like usernames, passwords, personal details, payment information. It's like sending a postcard and then anyone else can pick it up and read it. And then they've got sensitive information at their fingertips. But when a website uses HTTPS, like the one below, the connection is encrypted. So the information is scrambled. So even if someone intercepts it, they see nonsense instead of real information that's easy to read. And this is controlled by something called an SSL certificate. SSL certificates are provided by um, companies like AfriHost, Domains, GoDaddy. They provide these SSL certificates. And what these do is they provide or act like a digital lock or a key, which encrypts this. So think of it like putting your message in a sealed tamper-proof envelope like before, instead of vice versa. And envelope instead of just actually just using it as a postcard. So that's why every modern business or even small businesses would need this so that a website that is running on HTTPS is not running on HTTP. It enforces strong passwords for the admin portals. Further to that, multi-factor authentication is also another requirement when logging into your website so that anyone who's gained access to your website, they can go and change details. That's another thing that you want to enforce there in addition to the strong passwords that you particularly have. And then also another thing is to, if you do have the skill set or you have access to someone who can assist with this, is getting something that can, or getting a mechanism that will provide you with secure, up-to-date plugins or extensions. What this does is then it protects not only your business, but everyone who would interact with you online, your customers, your suppliers, partners. Why does this really matter for SMEs and public organizations? Again, if you've got a website and they don't necessarily have to log in and put their details like a username or password. Maybe it's not an e-commerce website. And maybe customers are just putting in their details like, hey, I'd like to be contacted. Please reach out to me. This is my email address. This is my number. And this is my request. Customers are entering that personal information. That's why it's important to have such a mechanism in place so that it's encrypted and it's not readable by anyone externally. Login portals are common targets for something called brute force or credential theft. Portals that we log in, like a banking portal or any other portal that actually interacts with us where we store our information and we have access to that information from a data perspective. HTTP websites will damage your credibility, and that's why it's important for small businesses, for any business, in fact. People don't trust that. And again, further to that, if people try to access your websites, people have software like firewalls or anything of that sort. If they do discover that it's just an HTTP website, people can't get to a website. It'll be blocked. So again, you're losing revenue and traffic that will be particularly going to your websites. And ultimately, attackers will use fake or cloned versions of unsecured websites to try and steal information. So for the fact that you've got an HTTPS associated website, that also helps reduce those chances of it happening. 4 steps that we've looked at. Just to recap, how to protect your customers is to collect sensitive information safely using secure platforms, not WhatsApp or email attachments. Another one would be protect your email domain with DMARC so that you can stop impersonation attempts. Add simple customer safety notices that can help prevent fraud and build the trust and show that you've got a standard operating procedure. And then, of course, secure your website or portals with secure certificates that will ensure your website has HTTPS, enforce MFA, and have strong access controls like any form of mechanism. These 4 actions alone are practical, they are affordable, and these can dramatically reduce the cyber risk for any organization. Another component that handles the data and communicates with the customers or the suppliers is people. They are your biggest strength, but also your biggest risk. Not because they are careless, but because they are human. So even with training, there's going to be that one wrong click, that one rushed moment, that one weak password we've been highlighting throughout this whole session, that can lead to a major incident. So how do we get our team members to support each other, support us, and how can we support them? So let's look at practical steps that can be enforced internally in an organization if you've got more than one individual. Let's look at one mechanism that we will all use, which is email. And this is an indispensable communication tool that we use on a day-to-day basis. But managing the information that floods our inboxes can be a challenging task. So what we often see is that people will access the client's email accounts and manage their day-to-day tasks so that they can focus on revenue-generating activities. But what we've actually noticed is that personal messages will slip into their business emails, which is why it's essential to clearly separate personal and business email accounts. And when I say personal, it could be linked to Takealot or any other platform that you subscribe to. So your Takealots, your Sheins, your Temus, all those updates that are linked to a corporate account. That's actually not good, because then what you can't do is you can't enhance privacy, security gets compromised, and also you can't ensure that there's, from a regularity perspective as well, and also improving professionalism and productivity. And again, a clunky mailbox will help you maintain a healthy work-life balance in general. So maintaining a separate personal or business email account will allow you to protect sensitive information. And also having different accounts will limit the potential danger or damage of exposing confidential information in cases of your personal account being hacked because you probably don't have a strong password, you don't have multi-factor authentication for your Gmail account as opposed to what you probably have for the business. So separating these will greatly reduce the risk of accidental sharing information that is confidential for the business, and then mixing it up with personal information when there's unintended recipients that actually require it as well. And also from a record management perspective, I mean, a business should have record management programs that help specify how long to keep specific categories of emails if you've got that in place from a POPI perspective. So in legal disputes, investigations, or audits or companies may need to produce relevant emails as evidence for compliance purposes. So when you have separate business and personal email accounts, your personal emails do not interfere with the records of management policies. Separating these two is very crucial when team members leave. So when you decide to sell the company or whatever the case is, it ensures that you retain the essential business-related email records in that business account, and then can seamlessly transfer to the new buyer, to the new team member, or the company owner that would want to take over the organization as well. I mean, from a professionalism perspective, apologies for that, separating business email accounts will present a professional image to clients or colleagues. It shows that you maintain a distinct identity for your professional interactions. A business email address, particularly your name at yourcompany.com, what that ultimately does, it just simply instills confidence if you don't have that in places yet, in your business partners, and strengthens your brand. So people will tend to deal with you much easier. If you have not been doing it and you've been doing it successfully, that's also good. But it also does add a little level, or if not more, a high level of confidence in that situation as well. We're back here again. But turning on multi-factor authentication for an individual is going to be quite crucial if we have this turned on for multiple individuals in the organization. And as we remember, this form of mechanism, multi-factor, will protect accounts from being compromised. If we're doing this for one individual, imagine how difficult it can be for multiple people that a business owner or a manager would need to handle. If multiple people in the organization, staff members, have a weak password, have weak password etiquette, or they just tend to forget their passwords, or they reuse the passwords as well, it actually increases the chance of a compromise or someone actually accidentally leaking information to attackers or external parties because of the specific weak etiquette. Another thing is that if the going gets tough with password etiquette across a group, there are tools that we can actually leverage out there that actually helps organizations to get that done, in addition to the authentication apps that will send us the two-factor forms. But from a password management, these will help staff members create strong passwords without having to remember them. They will securely store login credentials and other sensitive information, like credit card numbers, in an encrypted vault, often accessible with only a single master password or biometric if you're using it. And particularly, you'll use them on a phone. These apps will sit on your phone, similar to the previous apps that we spoke about, the multi-factor authentication apps. So if possible and applicable, subscribe to this as a business unit so that it's easy to manage the subscription and the people that leverage the technology to access the passwords that give them access to the platforms that you guys use to do your business. And again, back to this point, it's also important to try and separate business email accounts and business, call it subscriptions, to personal accounts as a rule of thumb from a management perspective. Again, this is a free aspect that anyone can utilize. We're so busy in the day, but providing short monthly training is very important. If you do have the personnel and the time and the expertise, providing training that's even 60 to 90 seconds is more than enough. Short, regular reminders that work way better than long sessions where people are grouped up into a room. The other reality is that most businesses sadly don't have the time to design cybersecurity training, run workshops, or remind employees every month. And most employees don't even have the time to sit through these long sessions. So this is when there's platforms that can be fully automated that you can deploy in your organization. This is an additional cost for organizations, but there's software out there that can automate cyber training, that provide short monthly 2 to 3 minute videos that can be delivered via email to each employee. In addition to that, it will track who watches it, who needs extra support, who works well for organizations. And particularly what this does, it'll work well for organizations that use Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace or any form of mail solution particularly. And what this will do, this will ultimately help drive and digitally give you insight into the team's digital footprint and help you identify risky team members over a period of time and give you metrics in that situation. When staff members leave, and again, high staff turnover could be a thing that you're probably dealing with. This is also one of the biggest risks for organizations of all sizes. So when an employee leaves an organization, it's always important to remove their access to secure information that could be leaked. And this is simply mailboxes or any platform that they had access to before. I mean, they're departing. Why do we still need to have an active license, which they currently have? So whether the departure was voluntary or involuntarily, failing to revoke the access to software accounts can increase the chances of facing risks like security breaches, intellectual property loss, data theft, or even a non-compliance regulatory fine, if you want to call it that. What we will speak to, I mean, why do you actually need to remove employee access? So some terminated employees, like those who have been let go under unfavorable circumstances, may seek retribution against the organization. So this is assuming that they still have access to sensitive information, company systems, or physical premises. They may cause harm or either intentionally or unintentionally do damage to the organization. So additionally to that, many industry regulators and data protection laws mandate that timely access verification be done for any employee that is about to, well, from a employee termination perspective. So if you fail to remove the access immediately after terminating an employee, it can lead to certain compliance issues in one form or another. So there's about 7 steps that we can actually look at that. So let's just look at simple ones. So if someone's about to leave, these are immediate actions as soon as someone is terminated or is confirmed by HR that it's always great to initiate or access removal or deprovision their process or deprovision their access to those platforms as well. These actions are time sensitive and always need to be coordinated between HR and IT if you do have these two forms of parties. But if you're running this organization as a one-man show, it's always best to try and do this at the point of the situation as well. And then second to that is accounts and credentials. Find all accounts and credentials that are associated to terminated employees, including local or network accounts. If you do have the chance to do that, cloud services, corporate applications, or email accounts. Reset the passwords or disable the accounts completely so that you can prevent unauthorized access. Former employees actually could knowingly, unknowingly access sensitive information from the past and make changes or extract information for their own gain in one form or another. And if you've given them any forms of devices like laptops, it's always great to retrieve company-issued devices like laptops or smartphones immediately as soon as they're about to leave the organization as well. And that way you actually reduce the exposure from a device perspective, because you will use this device for another employee if that's the case, and also from a data perspective. And from a security protocols perspective, if there are any rules or policies or technical measures that your organization should follow to ensure that data security is adhered to when an employee leaves, always, if you've got one in place, review and update these security policies. If you don't have one, it would be something that I would encourage you to put in place as a standard operating procedure to understand that if someone leaves the organization, in 2 weeks, we should either check mandate or assign this task to someone if you've got the extended assistance from an organizational perspective as well. And then ultimately, if you've got physical access, those access cards, revoke them or take them back if possible so that you can actually limit the exposure or any form of unintentional or intentional damage to the organization in any way or form. Another one, which I've seen in my past where I've worked for IT companies as well, is external service providers and partners that your organization may deal with as well. Informing and updating most of your partners that you work with, if you can, informing them that this said party has left the organization and they are unable to proceed and place orders in general, or actually interact with the organization utilizing your business's accounts in any form or way. That is also another thing that I would actually recommend you to put in place when people leave the organization. So protecting your team starts with simple, high-impact habits, storing business files in the cloud so that your data is safe and accessible and recoverable, turning on multi-factor authentication to block most account takeovers for everyone in the organization, and then sharing files using secure links, not email attachments, and then obviously making regular backups for the organization. These steps can generally help strengthen your team's overall security posture. But big companies are saying that cybersecurity budgets are tight, and only 3% feel that they have enough money. Again, this is based on the study that we had across the 1,100 security specialists from the multiple organizations that we interviewed. So if companies that are big are saying this, smaller and medium-sized organizations need smart and affordable strategies to be put in place. So the best cost-effective security setup that we have covered, mostly free from this session, MFA, utilizing the cloud storage capabilities that are probably part of your subscription that you've got at the moment, having a password manager to create passwords and store those passwords safely in a strong password etiquette, call it strategy, automatic device updates. If you can enforce these so that your patches, your machines, your cell phones, and your laptops are not compromised from a virus perspective. And basic cyber hygiene training, if you've got that in place or would like to invest in a tool that actually does that, that's something that you can look into as well. And then another tool, looking at domain authentication so that your customers are protected and don't get fraudulent requests from external parties pretending to be organization as well. But then there are affordable add-ons that you can incorporate that can enhance this. There's email protection, basically, which is still a number one entry point for cyber attacks. So there are email protection tools that can help protect or block phishing, impersonation, fake invoices, viruses, risky links before they even reach your team. And what this will ultimately do, in addition to everything that we've spoken about, it will reduce the human error, protect your brand, and then also prevent financial loss. Second to that is you do get platforms or tools that have a consolidated backup or archiving capability that will protect your business when data is lost, deleted, or hit by ransomware. Archiving particularly will keep your emails in a safe, stored manner for years so that you can even recover it in a quick format and obviously can even meet the compliance needs. Or even investigate incidents if there's a situation like that. But together, these can ensure that your business can continue to operate, even if there is some form of a breach or a data loss. The third one would be secure messaging or sensitive tools. There are tools out there that can help you send information securely using encrypted communication channels to your customers that are time limit associated, where you can expire them or recall them easily, as opposed to the standard email recalling capability that we all trust, but it often fails us. Number four, these tools can also give you some form of a threat scan, which can analyze your email environment, your domain for hidden risks that you potentially may not be exposed to, like compromised inboxes, exposed credentials like username and passwords, or unsafe settings that should be looked into as well. This will give you visibility into what attackers may already see and allow you to fix these issues before they turn into a breach. And then ultimately, what these tools need to give, if you're going to invest in a tool, it needs to help you monitor risky behavior. We spoke about human risk earlier on. Every organization has a few users who will unintentionally click on dangerous links or open suspicious attachments. There are monitoring tools that can help identify these patterns very early so that you can support the right people, improve the training, and then reduce the overall risk. But closing line here is that security doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to be intentional. Small, smart safeguards can create big protection for your businesses, for your customers, and your reputation. South Africa has an extensive network of technology providers that can help thousands of businesses, or that actually help thousands of businesses map out their digital landscape so that you can actually focus on what's important. And that would be, the passion, the creativity, and ultimately the revenue generation. And that's the reason why you actually started this business. Yeah. All right, so we've covered quite a lot, a few things in reality, even though it's quite a few things, but it's quite a lot. Here's a checklist that can actually help your team or yourselves. Firstly, just remember this 9 block here. You can take a screenshot of this, turn on MFA, store files in the cloud, train staff monthly, add email protection if the budget allows. Never change banking details over emails unnecessarily. Have a notice form that actually informs people how you handle such changes or requests. Keep updated backups. Set up DMARC, limit access to sensitive files, remove staff access immediately when they leave. So how about maybe we make this or turn this into an easy thing to remember? So I've come up with a one here which is called LSTC. I know this is not a drug, but what LSTC would stand for is lock, store, train, and check, just to help you remember most of the stuff that we've spoken about. And then obviously once you remember these, this will help you build it out. So we've got, from a locking perspective, speaks to MFA, password, DMARC, basically protect the access. Store would be associated to store your information on cloud storage platforms, leverage backups like hard drives to store information independently, ultimately or basically protect your documents. Train, if you can, provide monthly micro-learning, protect the people. And then C for check, if people are leaving the organization, you need to monitor it, remove or revoke the access. These forwards can help ultimately get to a point where it actually helps save your business. But cybersecurity doesn't need to be complex or expensive. This small, simple habits, if they're done consistently, they can protect your entire organization. If you remember nothing else from today, just remember lock, store, train, and check. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to thank SME South Africa for this opportunity, and to all of you for the time and commitment to keeping your business safe. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so, so much, Gary. Oh my goodness, that was quite a lot to take in. But as one of our attendees noted, is that you definitely do an exceptional job at navigating this minefield and teaching us how to navigate it as well. So before I get into any of the questions, I just wanted to make a short announcement to everybody watching this webinar today. So as SME South Africa, we're very, very excited to have everybody um, attend our next funding summit next year. So you heard it here first. The new, or well, the second edition, our next version of the SME Funding Summit will be happening on the 11th of June, 2026. And we are very, very excited to bring you even more insights, even more advice, more speakers, everything funding related to offer it to our audience. And ticket sales are open right now at a special early bird price. You can keep an eye on our social media or go have a look at the newsletter for more information. So, Gary, back to today's webinar. One of the first questions we have here is, as you alluded to earlier as well, SMEs have a very limited budget. If you have to point to three things that are non-negotiables that SMEs should absolutely do, what would that be?
Oh, Marion, I don't know if I lost you there, but I can't hear you anymore. But I heard the first part of it, limited budget. I think this is the one from Chifaro, right?
Yes, yes, the
Okay.
absolute three non-negotiables that every SME should do.
Um, it's actually an interesting question. Quite a tough one as well because it depends on the organization's, call it, use case, strategy. What is their bottom line? Like, how do they interact with the customers? What do they do? I mean, I've worked with guys who install geysers or the guys who install gas tanks. They don't leverage email. So how does a guy like that who's utilizing WhatsApp, or guys who actually just supply skips or skippers to actually just remove rubble? In cases like that, guys would use WhatsApp or communication tools like that. But what's important in that part is, firstly, because you're interacting with customers and there's information that's actually being stored on there, and generally, most organizations will use this device as a basis point of getting jobs done, even if you don't have a laptop. Just having a level of security like strong password, multi-factor authentication. I'm looking at free things right now, nothing that we need to buy at the moment. Just having those two parts there can increase your productivity and safety extensively. That's very important, not even for business. I think just for you as an individual, it's quite important to have those security measures in place. I mean, if someone's got access to a mobile device and you don't have a strong password or facial recognition, which most phones can actually do right now, they particularly have got access to your banking apps, which would be linked to your businesses. So really in that situation, it is a bit of a problem. So just looking at the basis point is, can we focus on, let's say you've got limited budget. Let's look at the domain of our control. What tools am I using extensively to communicate with my customers to get my jobs done? Um, People are sending me WhatsApps, they're sending me that. We'll get to that part. But just baseline, try and secure the device as best as you can. If you've got that in place, the information that your customers would share with you, if you're using WhatsApp particularly, you've got invoices that you're sharing. And maybe if you're using a manual form of invoicing, there's different tools that you can use out there that can help you automate this. And I've seen this with my brother. He's a sole proprietor, used to run this one man. He used to draft everything like by hand, all his invoices. So if he loses that invoice book, he doesn't even know his customers anymore. So this is where now he started to, subscribe to different platforms, affordable platforms that are cheaper than 100 Rand. A CRM platform that will help him invoice, store the customer information. And again, those type of platforms, there's an app for it. Even if you don't have a strong password for that app, which we'll get to, having the primary point of having a strong access to a device, not having it easily exposed to your kids if you've got kids in your home, that will actually help prevent that your customers' information is not compromised in any form or way. But I think it's just looking at, from a security standpoint, just to answer your question briefly, is if you are communicating with your customers and they're giving you information, just ensure that the exposure of that information on those respective devices is not careless, and you've got preventative measures to say, if my phone gets lost and I'm elsewhere, or if my laptop gets lost, I can recover that information firstly. And second to that, no one else externally can access that device and use my information without my knowledge or beyond my control. Having those measures in place would actually help. And if you've got the budgets to do that, then for organizations that it depends. If you're an organization that has over 50 individuals, then the use case really changes because then you're worried about a whole bunch of things. But if you are 5 people in the organization, ensuring that everyone, like we spoke about, a strong password etiquette, they remember their passwords, they've got multi-factor authentication in place, they files from a business perspective in a centralized storage platform. Call a file, whatever you want to call it. If you're using um, Gmail and you want to use G Drive, maybe give people access to that G Drive so that they share those documents in and store them in that G Drive repository as well. So centralize, secure, and call it, make what you've currently got more efficient from a security standpoint. Anything else is probably like a ripple effect after the fact. So Chifaro, I don't know if I've answered your question to a degree. It's quite a broad-based question, but once you've started with one exercise, it leads to another one to say, okay, I've got this in place. What are the chances of this actually happening? How can we delve into that? Or how do I mitigate this from happening? But basically, try and enforce everything that you've got. Secure the devices that you've got. Don't be careless with the device, like give it to anyone else out there. And yeah, just use it carefully because this one thing can actually make or break your business.
But definitely also how it ties in back into the short acronym you gave us for Alice
Yeah.
TC. The start
LSTCA.
by
Yeah,
locking.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yes, yes, yes. So, another question that's specifically aimed at startups is if you have to choose between encrypting your hard drives and securing cloud storage, what would you recommend?
So realistically, from what I see, is most organizations or most people even, um, like I had a 2 terabyte hard drive, honestly, and I've had it for more than 3 years, and I've only started utilizing it now. And for that entire time, I was using cloud storage, from a iCloud perspective, Google Drive also as well. I mean, just, yeah, I don't know how many storage platforms I've actually got. So it's not even to say which one is more important, because most of the time, if you don't have a cloud storage capability, I mean, you must be carrying a heavy bag because these hard drives, unless you're using an SSD, which is quite light, then it's quite a heavy bag because they're really not, they're not light, in addition to power banks and the laptop chargers and the laptop itself. But basically, from a from an operational perspective, cloud storage is generally the one that you use most of the time. And having that form of multi-factor authentication for those platforms would be like the easiest one that you could actually go and protect essentially. And then if you do have the expertise to go and encrypt the hard drive and ensure that, I don't know how many times you've got access to your hard drive and how many times you actually store to your hard drive as well. And also version rights, like if you're working on a document, pulling that hard drive out and plugging it into your laptop is a little bit more strenuous than just uploading it to a cloud. And again, version rights, if you're working on a specific document now, and if you're working on it when you get to a second destination, your cloud storage would have ultimately saved that update and give you that access. So from an up-to-date working perspective, cloud storage will actually give you an advantage from a productivity perspective. And then also from a security standpoint, not to say that it's actually better than the other, you can leverage both. But generally, I use my hard drive to store stuff that I don't want to store on my cloud storage that would probably, because cloud storage actually does cost money, even if it's free to a certain degree. You'll get like 50 gigs or 15 gigs for free, but then if that's actually maxed out, then you need to subscribe to a subscription. So in cases like that, then you can start to offload sensitive items that you won't have active access to. Then you can store them on the hard drive, and then you can do the encryption in that particular situation. But anything that's important, you can store it on your cloud hard drive, basically, theoretically, from what I've actually seen and how I actually operate in my day-to-day basis. And the hard drive itself, just be very careful because even if you've encrypted it, if you've lost it, it's practically a safe lost item. So it's so having a storage device, then you need to just weigh in to say, if I were to lose this information, how would it affect me? Does it equate to how much I would pay, maybe 50 Rand or 80 bucks extra just for a bigger storage repository that I can access anywhere, anytime, across any device, even if that device was actually lost. So I think it's just weighing in what are the disadvantages from a operational part, even if it's not just for business, but just for yourself from an advantage perspective. That's how I would view it, particularly from not necessarily from a security standpoint, because both of them will give you that form of reliance and peace of mind. But it's more of if the one gets lost, what happens? But if the one gets highly secured with MFA, password etiquette, on one device, and I don't have an account that's call it accessible on every device, and I've only got a one device, then the storage platform would particularly win in most cases if money is really not an issue, but generally these are quite affordable from what I've actually seen.
That's a very practical approach. Thank you so much, Gary. Another question we have is there any cybersecurity training similar to what you've just presented that you'd actually recommend that somebody can attend or maybe send their staff to?
Very good question. The, and the thing is, it's like an injustice to society because this is information that we need. This actually should be like at primary and high school level, to be honest with you. It should be part of the curriculum, not even like a business outcome.
And not
Um,
just in CAT or something like IT
Yeah,
across the
yeah,
board.
exactly. Because it's technology is becoming quite a massive part of our day-to-day living. Um, like like I see my folks and I think of them and I see how technology has actually advanced so much. It can be frustrating for me when I don't want to get some when I can't get something to work. Imagine what that looks like for someone who doesn't have a very high level of, okay, how do I switch on a PC? how do I get to the control system? What is Control Alt Delete? Like if they don't have that concept as well, so it makes it very difficult, and it's quite an injustice. Obviously, from a South African standpoint, if we look at the computer literacy perspective, or those what do you call it? Those that information, if you want to look at it that perspective. But for organizations that want to incorporate this, firstly, if you do have people within your circles that are in the field, that is like the easiest accessible, sometimes to a free degree that you can leverage. Uh, but if you have questions on who can I work with, because what I deal with on a day-to-day basis is I work with a lot of integrators, specialists. I've been at that level as well, where I've worked with these integrators or specialists that help organizations leverage technology. Is then I can help you get a view of that. But I think Marina can help you get us in contact. You can find me on LinkedIn, literally name Gary Manzini. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help you articulate this and a basis point. And I mean, this is why I decided to work with SME South Africa to have this session here because I'm quite passionate with small businesses or any business of any size for that fact. And the biggest part of my journey was helping organizations adopt what they currently have. And that's a thing which a lot of organizations, unfortunately, are not exposed to. There's organizations that pay an X amount of money for whatever they're using to get their jobs done or to get to a customer and deliver a product, but they're not actually getting that view of how to maximize that technology, how to leverage that technology so that it can make your operations much faster, more efficient, use information. There's a lot of tools in the platforms that you are paying for. I can definitely guarantee you that. And most organizations are only using up to 20%, only up to 20%. So then what does that mean for the rest of that? But if you'd like to engage with me, more than happy for you to reach out to me. There isn't a formalized platform or forum that I know of as well, but generally, if there's forums like that, it will be associated to specific technologies. If you're using Microsoft, there'll be a forum that speaks to that. There's a lot of content on YouTube or whatever the case is. But again, you don't have the time to go and consume all that. If you don't, then this is where now leveraging specialists like ourselves or SME South Africa, where they expose you guys to guys like us, and then we can impart or share that knowledge and then guide you in any way possible.
Awesome.
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you
yes.
so
So
much,
Maureen, yeah, you
Gary.
can. Yeah.
And then I
I've got
think
a
a
different
last
question.
question just to round off today is although this session was specifically aimed at entrepreneurs, somebody did raise a very interesting point. So if you're not necessarily working in the exco level of an organization, how do you get buy-in from the top? Maybe even if you have a business partner and you have to now convince them that cybersecurity needs to be a priority. Any tips on that?
Very, very interesting question because I deal with that on a day-to-day basis, articulating that value. So it's the conversations we generally have. Um, and I think the mindset is that people still see technology as a tool and not necessarily an enabler for organizations to leverage to get to a specific point. And they think that security is like a separate thing from technology that would enable them. That productivity tool that they are utilizing to get their jobs done, it just starts and stops there. But then I think the problem from what I've seen in the time that I've actually worked in this field is articulating the context of why security, when you speak to someone, and an ExCo board could be multiple individuals. There will be someone from a CFO perspective, someone at an executive perspective. There'll be someone from a human resources perspective. There'll be someone from an operational perspective. All of these individuals have their own set KPIs. Obviously, they all arch at the top to the CEO. The CEO has got like, I need to get to a specific outcome from a revenue perspective. And then there's different elements that help us achieve that. But and again, I completely attest with what you're saying. It actually is not easy to communicate this to exco team members, or even not even exco team members, to team members across the organization. Because you will have an idea of this is how I think things can be done in the organization, and I see this gap. What is your perspective? Perspectives will be very different. And it's usually when we can't get to a unified outcome, which is how does the business get revenue? If we can start there at the top to answer your question, and then break down to understand if I'm able to, and I hate using this analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway. I've got a bucky with apples. I need to deliver these apples before they go off. I'm the CEO of the company. They need to go. Otherwise, I've lost revenue. I've lost my foliage. I need to go and grow again. It's loss of money. But in the same process, me getting to customers, there could be someone who scams me and says, hey, listen, I've got 500 Rand to buy your batch of apples. Can you pay me? There's a tool that would have actually helped me prevent being duped into that type of transaction. And again, it's articulating or putting those two together to say, listen, you've got product A that needs to get to customer B or to customer A or B, whatever the case is. But in that transaction, there's multiple hurdles that could prevent us from turning our product into revenue. And so sometimes what I've seen with the guys I interact with would be in the IT space is we talk technical jargon, tell them this is what it does, this is the feature set, but the other team members don't really see that. They just want to understand basically why do I need to leverage a security tool like multi-factor authentication? If you tell your Exco member, listen, if people go around and impersonate your brand and start targeting our customers, people are going to lose confidence in our organization. We're going to lose an X amount of money. It's when you start to articulate the value or the money level of it as well. This is when it starts to trigger and evoke emotions because then there's a bottom line that affects their outcomes. It's not necessarily that I've got a laptop that boots up in 12 seconds. No one really cares about that in reality. But if I can travel from point A to point B, I'm in an airport and I need to quickly jump into a meeting, I can boot up my laptop in this amount of time and be able to join this meeting, regardless of the time I'm actually stuck in a specific place, and be able to operate as if I am not interrupted. And this is actually great for work from home strategies. For people who really want to jump into that messaging, if you give them that value perspective, that helps them understand, okay, then I can pay an X amount because it helps me look like a winner in this degree. So what I generally do is I work with specialists that are in that particular field, call it the IT field, to articulate from a security standpoint, why would we need to enforce security measures like this? What are we seeing from a global perspective? What are our peers experiencing from a global perspective? And what are they losing? What could we potentially lose? Do we have the risk appetite to entertain this negligence in the organization? And once you get that, and if they say, look, I really don't care, then I think then you probably might need to find another organization to work for. But once you articulate those aspects in a very plain, simple way that speaks to value, money loss, time lost, and equate that again back to money, which is still the bottom line that makes the world go around, then your conversation becomes a little bit easier. Then you understand I can spend an X amount of money on such a thing if I was to lose this. And then you can start to play with the ratios. If it costs you, and I didn't mention it earlier on, but if protecting an organization costs an individual, or let's say we've got 10 people, and buying 10 people a Nando's Grande meal every month, which is about 113 bucks. If we can spend 113 bucks times 5 for the year, it'll cost us an X amount of time. I don't know who's doing that calculation. It'll cost us this amount of money to spend this amount of money for lunch just once a month. But then if we were to be compromised, if someone loses their device and someone hacks into our platform or logs into that laptop and targets our customer, and we lose 50,000 Rand as opposed to 13,000 Rand for the whole year, how do we define the ratio? Like, what's the risk appetite? And then it's defining those two aspects. Generally, that helps. I'm not saying it'll solve. It also depends on the person that you're talking to and that you're dealing with. But articulating the value, oh yeah, articulating the value to the situation, that's generally how it helps. It's quite a difficult one. I can't really give you a defined answer in that situation. Yes, Mr. Maloy, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. That'll be much easier. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, and I leverage that extensively to communicate with external parties or anyone of that sort that wants to engage from this type of level. I think Lungelo, I've answered your question. I think I've lost my team members, but Lungelo, I think I've actually answered your question. Lungelo, is your question answered? All right, sure. I think just to usher everyone off the session, thank you to everyone who's given us and dedicated the hour and a half to the session as well. This will be on the SME South Africa website for you guys to engage and get a view of the session that we spoke about today. If you'd have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. It'll be Gary Manzini that you can reach out to as well. More than happy to have that conversation and see how we can turn this landscape into reality for you guys and make sense of it all. But what I'd like to do is to thank you all for joining, and I wish you all a good weekend ahead. And yeah, for the rest of the year, I wish you all the best.